Yo, what is up? All right, guys, we are live, and we got a special guest today on the show. We got Saad in here. Saad is someone who I probably talk football with more than any other person I know. Someone I highly value his thoughts, and something I love about my talks with Saad is that there are so many players that we are just in different views of. So I'm really, really excited to have you on today. How you doing today?
Good man, how about you?
Doing well, doing well. If anyone's in chat and you're listening, if the sound sounds off for either of us or for some reason you can't hear one or the other, please say something. But we should be good. It looks like it's coming through. And just do a little housekeeping before we jump into today's topic. But again, hopefully you have found me on my socials. We're on X, which is where we post if we're running late, like we were today. Had some last second watching of my kid, and family always comes first. So we're starting about a half hour late. So sorry about that if you did not see that and you've been waiting for a while. But I know most people are probably going to be watching this someday down the road, maybe years from now on YouTube when they're like, what was this guy talking about? But if you haven't found me on YouTube yet either, it is just No Chill Boom as of right now. We are going to start polling a little bit more on the name changes, which I should have near me. What did I just click on? I just clicked on something. Um, I need to pull up the different name recommendations we had about a week ago posted, and the top so far are still the No Chill Zone, Overturned, Fantasy and Chill Football Podcast, the Fantasy Chill Zone. I think there are a couple other suggestions, so um, we will see there. Is there a chance that I just stopped stream? No. Okay. I clicked on something and it actually pulled me away from my dashboard. So I'm sorry if something funky happened on your end. But guys, if you're not following on X, at least make sure you go and follow, subscribe on YouTube. If you like the content, obviously don't subscribe if you don't like the content. But anyone that's subscribed as of on our Friday stream, we'll be pulling up any of the different names. We're going to do a live raffle off. Right now, we got like 4 people subscribed. So honestly, if you go on and you subscribe, you got a good shot of winning our giveaway of our ranking sheet, which I was just talking with Assad about. It's not even 100% done, so I got a little bit more work to get into that this week, but it will be something that's updated all the time. So rankings right now versus what rankings are going to be at the start of the season will be different. And guess what? You'll have the live updates as it's happening. Really excited about that. If you're interested, we are going to do future giveaways, and those will kind of be based around the YouTube channel as well. So if you're interested in being in these giveaways, check out the YouTube channel. If you like the content, subscribe. Appreciate you guys. So jumping in to our main topic for today, it's going to be kind of like last week where we had Wednesday, Friday, kind of a two-part between AFC, NFC. This is just a two-part in our rankings. So we're going to kind of dig into QB2s today. So 13 through 24. We will start at 24 and work our way up. Now, if you're saying, hey, you're missing, those other starting QBs, there are 32 teams in the NFL. Well, if you're in fantasy and you really need that fine advice of 25 through 32, you're either in one of those super duper deep leagues, like those 32-man leagues. And if you're already in that, you should be pretty in depth in knowledge. And honestly, there's not many guys past this 24 spot that have a ton of value, which we'll eventually talk about. There are some guys that maybe they blow up. I don't want to give away names that you don't know if they're going to be on this list or not, but we're really most of your value is coming from QB1s and 2s. Wouldn't you agree, Saad?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I mean, the issue is that some of these guys that are beyond QB 24, a lot of them are iffy if they're going to be splitting time with another quarterback. Some of them are rookies. You don't know if they're going to start right away. So it's best to just take guys are going to have a role in this league to start the year.
And I'm not trying to give away anything, but like Drake May is someone who didn't make our top 24 list. Now, when you watch his college tape versus what he could do in the NFL, there's no doubt in my mind that he could be a top 24 guy, but we don't even know if he's going to be the starter or what he's going to play this year with Brissett. And so some of those guys are what fall into there. Just like you said, you're gonna have some guys that are maybe even going to be backups. We're a little unsure on their role or their rookies. And we will have time to talk about them. There's a lot of time till the season starts, and we will definitely discuss some of those guys because there is upside in drafts to taking those guys. But you might end up, depending on draft strategy, end up with one of these QB2s as your starter. And we want to try and give you the most information that we can to have you maybe take a more educated decision on who you like in this range, or just as a backup who you want to have. So we're just going to jump right in, starting with number 24 on the list. I think for me, this player, when I looked at their last season and just watching the games, now I only had him in one league, and that was a dynasty league, and he was not for necessarily playing this year as much. Like I wasn't dependent on him, but he ended QB 23, and it was Bryce Young. Bryce Young played 16 games, ended at QB 23, but it looked awful. Like it felt like he was 30 or 31 or 32, and mainly because of like the team success. It was very poor. Um, and we have him at 24, where I think he's deserving to be in the top 24. One, because he technically did it year one while looking terrible, but they made a lot of changes in the offseason. A lot of offensive linemen added. If you were on our episode on, I think it was Wednesday when we talked about it, they added I think four between tackles and guards, four different guys onto that O line to add a little extra depth and a little extra strength there. Brought in two receivers. It's a very different, and drafted the first running back off the board in the draft. So there's a lot of changes. Saad, what are your thoughts with Bryce Young here at 24?
I mean, you look at last year, there was nothing really that impressive with him, but you could argue that he's going to get a brand new wide receiver one, wide receiver two, new O line, new
Mm-hmm.
running back one, all in 1 year. I mean, that's a lot of moving pieces that, could actually be in Bryce Young's benefit. So it's not someone I want to put all my eggs in that basket, but it's someone who, to keep an eye on for me. You never know what's going to happen. New coach change as well. So there's a lot working in Bryce Young's favor. It's just a matter of whether or not he can get it together.
Yeah. And I think something with his value and sitting where he is, he's not being drafted much higher than this. I really got to have my ADP list next to me. I'm pulling it up on my phone next time you're talking,
He is
so I
QB
have it.
26.
26. So you're not paying any premiums for him. He's someone that I think I would find myself in more of a best ball situation. So if you do best balls, where you have some extra QBs in there, he's someone that I think will consistently give you mediocre numbers. So I'm not excited about him. I don't think he's going to have many weeks where he wins it for you. But we also haven't really seen what he fully can be. And he didn't have the weapons. He had a terrible line. This is a big prove it year, and it feels like he has what he needs around him to show what he can be. So if he's terrible this year, it's gonna be hard to have any faith in him moving forward from my side, barring catastrophic injuries or changes that we aren't expecting. But this is a big prove it year for him. We do have some changes here though too. They do have a new head coach, so head coach change. I also, recommendation of AirJ96, who is also currently live right now on Kick and on Twitch. And if you want to check him out, he's been on our show a few times. But he recommended putting. We're gonna just mention the backup QB situation for each team. Do you have any thoughts on this backup QB situation for Bryce Young? If he were to go down, would you find yourself possibly be considering the backup as your backup?
You're talking about Andy Dalton here?
The one and only.
I mean, that's rough, man. Because you look at this team and you say it's not that impressive on paper, and then
Yeah.
you put Andy Dalton at the helm, and I mean, if I was in a pinch, I might stream him, but
Yeah.
it's not someone I want to start on a week-to-week basis.
It's kind of tough, and it's always nice when your backup is someone that's veteran, right? Like someone that's been in the league. He like Andy Dalton had a career, so he was good once upon a time. In regards to he wasn't always just a backup, which you see from, I think you see less of now. I think there are more guys who have actually been starters as backups on this list. I'm just looking through real quick. It's like a 50-50. Um, but in regards to fantasy, the last few times Andy Dalton's had to step in, he's not very viable. But he has a veteran behind him who hopefully is they're linking up and he's learning from him in this offseason. I'll at least just leave it at that. I think the one change to mention with the head coach, and this is something that Saad brought. Actually, I can let you speak on it too with Dave Canellis. I don't know how you say his last name,
You got
but
it.
his previous two roles, he was pretty instrumental in two different QBs. I don't know if you want to speak on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Canales essentially gave life to Geno Smith's quarterback career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a nobody in the Jets. He got over to the Seahawks. Everyone thought he was the backup to, I'm gonna forget, was it Drew Lock?
Yeah, I
Everyone thought he
think it
was going
was
to be the
Drew
backup to
Lock.
Drew Lock. And then he actually won the quarterback competition at Dave Canales and revitalized his career.
And did
And
he win
then
comeback player that year too? I know he's in consideration. I don't know if he won it or
I don't think he
someone else
won it.
did. Hamler coming back to life. I don't know if that was the same season, but
It might have been that season.
so maybe he lost it to a guy that actually died on the field and came back, but like revitalized his career.
Yeah, and he actually put up good numbers, when he actually did
Yeah.
do his comeback. I mean, you can't you can't not look at statistics and see what he did for Geno.
And there's another
And then
QB
he
that he
goes,
turned around.
yeah, he goes to Tampa Bay and he turns Baker's career around. And I mean, Baker was everyone that was a quarterback that everyone just said, his career's over. He's done with the Browns. Then he was a Panther. Then he was a Ram.
Yep.
And he's a Tampa. Then he's back to the Bucks for a
His
1 year
journey's
deal. And
crazy.
yeah, but I mean, he had a heck of a career, year last year. I mean, he was easily like a low end QB1, high end QB2 last year for fantasy, and
Yep.
he gave Mike Evans a great wide receiver 1 year last year. So
Yeah. I mean,
now
he
he's with
ended the
Bryce Young.
season at QB11. Baker did.
Yeah,
So he did well
good
in
year for
regards
him.
to fantasy. I don't have his consistency charts next to me, but I mean, when you finish at 11, that's a pretty good sign, especially after being a guy that was thrown around basically as a backup or that kind of journeyman that maybe like the Fitzpatrick. That's kind of what it was feeling like for Baker, unfortunately, as a number one pick. It's crazy. So we'll jump away from Bryce now and jump to our QB23. Saad, do you want to introduce this man?
I mean, I don't like this man, but we gotta talk about him, Mr.
I
Deshaun
don't.
Watson.
I don't like him either.
I don't think anyone really likes the man, but as the
Mm-hmm.
football player, Deshaun Watson, he's coming into year 3, I believe, on the Browns.
I believe so. Has he played
Yep,
more than like 15
12
games?
games.
Has he even played a total like of a season?
I don't think he has. No.
It's been
Yep.
tough.
When he first got traded, there was a suspension, and then he played a few games, looked terrible. Last year, played a few games, didn't look that great. Hurt his shoulder, didn't play the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the year. Now going into year 3, it's is Deshaun Watson the same Deshaun Watson we saw in the Texans? Is he just a bum that got a ton of money?
Mm-hmm.
To be determined.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. Last year you only saw a little bit from him, right? He played, where's my list? 6 games, ended at QB 36. So I mean, for playing 6 games, it's too hard to really know. But when I watched tape, he looked bad. Like it wasn't just that
Yeah.
he played. And the thing is, Joe Flacco coming off the couch put up insane numbers. So it wasn't that the team wasn't capable of producing. He was a shell of
Oh,
what he used to be. And I think when you look at a guy who was such a mobile QB2, you expect some of that, rushing yards. I don't know how much rushing yards we're even gonna see from him. I hope you see some for fantasy purposes and for just enjoying watching football. But I'm much more down on him than most. Uh, but I think 23 is fine. I don't think it's terribly far off from ADP, which I still haven't finished pulling up. So, but he he's not someone that I would be excited with on the team. And actually, for me, I might even flip my personal rankings, flip Bryce Young and Deshaun Watson just for the consistency. And it almost feels like a safer play taking Bryce Young. But the upside, if Deshaun Watson becomes even close to what he used to be, is really high. Like he could be that top end QB2. if he really is playing well.
Well, I mean, to put it in perspective, when he was in Houston, when he actually played all 16 games, he was quarterback five, and then quarterback five, and then quarterback five.
Yeah, pretty good numbers if you.
Pretty good.
So yeah, it's interesting. All right, I'm pulling up the ADP finally. That way I
It's
can stop
21.
just guessing every time. But so he's right around where we have him. It's 21, 22 if you're on Fantasy Pros. Um, it's yeah, it'll be an interesting year because he does bring a little bit more upside than I think a couple of the guys that we'll be talking about back here. But honestly, even looking at the people above him, they finished respectably last year, and he's back at 23 for a reason for us. And I think I still am taking everyone above him, even with the upside opportunity from Watson. That's just not the risk I'm taking. Unless maybe it's sitting. If I already have a stud QB and I can take him at the very end of the draft, where if I need to sit on two QBs, he's there. That's more of what I'm looking at with him. I'd be pretty disappointed with him as my starter.
Yeah, he's on a do not draft list for me personally. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, from what I saw in his play last year, like all it took from Flacco is just hyper targeting Cooper and Njoku. And if Deshaun Watson can't figure that out, that's on him. He
Yeah.
kept targeting Elijah Moore, who didn't do anything. He had
Yep.
like three
But
yards
he's
per
so
catch,
great.
something silly like that.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at those, like, all you have to do is hit Njoku on a 2 yard route, and the man's going to get an extra 8 yards for you. Njoku is an absolute monster at tight end. So, yeah, I think you nailed it. The options of who he's throwing to just made no sense. He held onto the ball too long.
Too
Um,
long.
and I think some of that, like, I hold it too long, at least I can scramble mindset is there for a guy who doesn't, but then he didn't scramble like he used to either. So we'll see. I don't feel great about him. Don't really want him. I have 0% share of him right now in my best ball, which is saying a lot because there are times where weird things happen and you normally get a share of a lot of guys you don't like late if you're someone like me drafting a lot of 12-man leagues already. But as a backup, he's got Jameis Winston. That's a great backup
Hey,
situation.
I love Jameis.
We haven't seen much of Jameis
Mr.
recently,
Lasik himself.
but it feels like kind of like to me, there's like this little bit of a Joe Flacco type situation where if something happens, he's not on the field, he's not playing. I could see Jameis coming in and actually being fantasy relevant and throwing for a bunch of yards, making the receivers more relevant. I think it benefits the receivers more than the QB, but like I would rather, for fantasy purposes of the receivers and tight ends on the team, have Jameis at QB. And that might be a hot take,
100%.
but I would feel better at that. And again, it's another QB we haven't seen a lot of over the last few years, kind of sitting as backups and not getting many opportunities. But what he did pre being a backup is more conducive to having not been on the field. I think he can come back as a thrower and throw again, like you look at what Joe Flacco did, versus a guy that was dependent a little bit on the running, and he was a good thrower too. I don't want to take that away from Watson. Clearly, if you're under QB5 year over year in fantasy, you can throw the ball and run the ball. So it's an interesting situation, and I actually would not be surprised if Jameis sees the field for a chunk of games.
But I did want to bring it up with Jameis Winston. Last time we played 16 games, quarterback four, 5,000 yards, 33 touchdowns. He may have thrown 30
How many
interceptions,
interceptions?
but you can forget about that.
So if you're in a league like the Dynasty League we just started that has, what is it, like 4 points or 3 points per interception, maybe Jameis isn't your guy, but he had LASIK, so maybe you can see now, and we'll go there. So again, I think for both of us, we're out on Watson, but out of respect for what his upside, we kind of not had to, but chose to put him in the top 24. But again, I personally take Bryce Young over him if I'm drafting. And I'm not really a risk averse drafter either. Saad's been enough drafts with me to know that I like taking risks, probably to a fault. So he's someone I'm out on, and I'm also not someone that like just doesn't draft someone because they're an asshole and bad person. I'm like, it's football and I like winning money. As much as I, would like to avoid that, sometimes, winning some money is okay. I'm gonna probably get a little heat for saying that, but let's just
I mean,
jump on to.
Tyreek Hill wins championships, man.
He does win championships. That he does, and he's trying to make a run for most kids too. He's getting close now. As long as you don't quantify it with the same woman, he's well on his way.
No one will beat Phil Rivers. Let's put it that way.
He's not far off. I don't remember the exact number, but did you see the recent post of how many kids he has? He has
That's
like
ridiculous.
6 different women and I don't know, 8 different kids. Something like that. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah, Rivers should hold that because he's probably still pushing out, 1 to 2 a year. So I wouldn't put it past him. Jumping over to our 22, I think this is where we're gonna get the most heat. I think in regards to I think it's a completely reasonable spot based off of historical data. But because of the situation this person is coming into, I think a lot of people will have him much, much higher than where we have him. But at 22, we both actually were low on Caleb Williams. And I already can hear my brother just call me a hater. I like Caleb Williams for year one and year two. I just don't like his long term. I'm a little bit out on that. But historically, rookie QBs really struggle from a fantasy perspective, from a just success overall in football perspective. I know this is one of the top scouted QBs coming out, kind of like that Andrew Luck level. And obviously, if he comes out like Andrew Luck, and he's going to be pretty useful. But it's hard for me to take him over the people that I have above him. And I think that's more of the issue is not, I think we're just deep with these QBs right now that I trust in these offenses that I would rather take the people above him. And I would be comfortable and fine with Caleb Williams as my QB. I don't think I'd be that mad. Whereas if like the difference between him and Deshaun Watson for me is massive. But I would still like I said, I'd much rather have the people above it. But do you have any input here on Mr. Caleb Williams, number one overall?
It's not that I don't like the player or his potential. It's just, you look at rookies like, if you were to take a guess, when Trevor Lawrence was drafted, where do you think he finished?
Oh, he had a lot of interceptions that first year, fumbles, turnovers. I'd say 20. I'd say 22.
You're a bit off. It was 23.
23. Okay.
And what about Joe Burrow?
Oh,
Everyone loved Joe Burrow
Joe
coming out of college.
Burrow, hot. I would have guessed, he would be in that like 18 to 16 range.
Maybe 25.
25. And I mean,
Rookies don't really produce their rookie year,
yeah.
man.
And you
It
look
doesn't
at
happen.
Burrow, who's just incredible, and yeah, still has proved. And I try to remember his rookie year, what his receiver core was, but did he have Higgins? Did he come in with
Did
Chase?
he came in with, I think Boyd was his best
And then
receiver.
he got Chase year two,
I think it was
year three even.
you have Higgins.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
wait,
might
was
be.
Higgins drafted the same year as him?
That's what I was trying to remember. Either way, he didn't. They've always had at least two receivers that are fine, like on their right. So it's not like he's coming in with nothing. So I think the difference in what a lot of people will say is yes, those QBs were supposed to be all that. However, look at Caleb Williams' receiver room. And I think that is the difference here where like I said, I would feel comfortable with him, and I don't often feel very comfortable with a lot of the rookie QBs. I'm not excited about him as my QB if I'm drafting him. But the tough thing is like also look at the coaching. What has this coaching staff done that is still the same moving into this year? I know they added a ton of people, but do you have full faith that he's going to immediately step into an NFL offense, be productive? I mean, maybe later on in the season, I'd be more interested in kind of giving him a shot. But in regards to drafting him, he's going right now on the Fantasy Pros ADP has him at 13. I don't know if you have something different, but
On
I'm
Underdog,
not
he's QB 11.
11. So you're looking at drafting him basically as an end of at the turn of a QB 1 and 2, and I'm never going to touch him there. So for my purposes, I don't see myself having any shares of him at all. but he's an interesting one because of rookies that aren't predominantly going to get their production out of running. He is someone who he's in a good situation. It just hasn't worked in the past, even with guys that were in good situations.
My issue is that at QB11, you're drafting him for what I feel is his ceiling as a rookie.
Yes,
I
I
mean,
think that's
you're
a
looking
key
at
point.
Matt Eberflus has a 29% win rate in this league.
So bad.
That's kind of disgusting. And
Yeah.
so you think that Bryce or Caleb Williams is going to turn that around? I mean, I like Justin Fields. I thought he was a great quarterback. I
Mm-hmm.
think that they just needed to work around him,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't, and they lost games. What makes it think
Yeah.
it's going to be any different with Caleb?
Yeah. And I will say just for all the people that are going to call me haters, I do think it'll work better in the earlier stages with Caleb than it did with Fields. The difference, though, is Fields could produce with his legs more than what Caleb is going to, which he can. He can produce his legs. I feel like it's very hard to be a QB in the NFL or in college without being able to move around. But yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in him. Also, their backup, just as FYI, is Tyson Bagent. I don't know how to say
Agent,
his agent.
not good either.
Um, not good. So if he goes down, that's going to be a tough situation. And I think the big impact for me, like I'm not taking the risk with Caleb Williams, even though he could end up as that kind of guy at the turn, the top of the QB2s. But like you said, I think he's being drafted at his absolute ceiling. I think the highest, what was the highest a rookie QB has been is like 8, I think.
Herbert, I think, was 7.
7. So yeah, right at that kind of 7, 8 mark. Like even if he produces at QB 8 or 7 this year and you're drafting him at 10, 11, like that just to me isn't worth the risk because the odds of him being the best rookie QB of all time for fantasy is just to me like I'm not taking the risk that that's what I'm going to get just for a small amount of upside. So I think you nailed it on in regards to like why I won't be drafting him just because I would like someone with more upside because he's not being drafted far off from someone I'm in love with in Kyler Murray. Like he's being drafted relatively close to Kyler Murray and Jordan Love and like these guys that I would have feel way better taking. So we'll jump away from Caleb Williams, though. We'll jump down to our number 21, who did finish last season at QB15. So we are having them drop a bit versus last year. They played 15 games last year. And I think you mentioned one of them, they played like 30% of the snaps or something along those lines. So it was really like 14. But still ended at QB15, which is good numbers. Matthew Stafford. Do you want to start in this one or you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I could take it. I mean, I do like Matthew Stafford as a quarterback. I think
Mm-hmm.
he's good. It's just he's getting older.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of injuries as of recent. Um, I mean, his wide receiver core is great. I mean, I love Cooper Kupp. I love Puka Nacua. It's his line isn't that great. His
Mm-hmm.
defense is losing Aaron
Pieces,
Donald, which
yeah.
is kind of big.
Kind of big. He's
Kind of
decent.
big. Yeah, he's a decent player. Maybe Hall of Fame. You never know. But yeah, I just can't see Matt Stafford being the Matt Stafford of old. Especially with his injury history, and there's just quarterbacks like more than him. I think that's really what it comes down to. I have nothing against the
Yeah.
guy. It's just age, maybe a little regression in that age, and just better younger quarterbacks ahead of him.
Yep. Yeah. I hopefully my sound stuff didn't change at all. I'm gonna try and do something slightly different, just so it doesn't look like I'm just sitting here with nothing. I'll see how the screen shares, but yeah, Matthew Stafford, I do like. I think that offense is going to produce. I love the receivers. I love some of the values that are there right now in drafts. I talked a little bit about it on Friday's episode if you did watch that. Um, it's tough because he's getting old and doesn't have the line that he used to have. So uh, I again another guy that he's fine if I have him because I went QBs late. It is what it is, but also I'm not really targeting him even while fully believing that receiver core. So he's just kind of a middle of the road one for me. His backup is Stetson Bennett. We've never seen him play in the NFL, right? He hasn't even done a snap. Is that correct?
No, he came into the league at 27
Yeah.
years old.
He's one of the oldest QBs coming in the league. Older than old man 75-year-old this year, Bo Nix. Also, this one is not showing your thing as well, so I'm going to switch back to the previous page I said before. Sorry for the bad visuals. Yeah, I don't think he's played a snap though. So I I don't know what to expect from him. If he comes in, he's in a great situation with a good coach and great receivers. So I guess it may be fantasy relevant if you take Stetson Bennett if Matt Stafford went down. But for me, Matthew Stafford has produced. But if you watch his tape, you can see him aging. You do see it. He has been getting a little bit worse. He has an unreal receiver core, which is just going to allow him to be a safe bet. I don't mind taking him as that kind of middle of the road QB2. Um, he has upside to move into maybe a little bit higher in the QB2s, but I don't see any upside for him to move into a QB1. And for me, some of the next people we're going to talk about have that upside to be QB1s. So that's why I have him down here at 21. Um, and again, we kind of tried to do a little bit of our rankings combined. Kind of did a little give and take. When I launch my ranking sheet, you'll see where my exact personal spots are on people. But he's not someone with a ton of upside. He's going to be someone consistent. If you really send QBs late, I don't mind him. He's not being drafted early, which is great. I think it's roughly around 20th that he's being drafted, 1920. So kind of similar range to where you have him, and I'm fine with that spot.
Yeah, underdog has him at 19.
Perfect. Yeah, I really should pull up the underdog one. That's the one I use the most. I don't know why I pulled up Fantasy Pros, but I'll just leave it. Jumping to our number 20 QB, he finished at QB 19 last year, playing 15 games. With a new offensive coordinator of Ryan Grubb, we got Geno Smith, Mr. 33-year-old. I think he turns 34 at the start of the season. Um, Geno is interesting because when he's playing, he never feels amazing when you have him. Like he's not putting up these crazy top numbers, but you have someone that's pretty consistent. He's got a great receiving core, good running back room, decent line. Like it's all fine. It's just never flashy or not getting big production. In regards to, it's interesting because I think him and Matthew Stafford for me, those are two that maybe I flip personally. Um, it's definitely close for me. They feel very much the same situation. A little bit older, they're not doing it with their legs as much. They're not putting up huge weeks where I don't see either of them being in the a QB1 situation throughout the season very often. But I'd feel very comfortable and safe week in and week out with them at QB, which honestly is not that common, I guess, for like the 20s. So, they feel just very safe and simple with low upside. That's where I have Geno.
What if I told you that Geno Smith was the QB1 against the Dallas Cowboys last year?
I would
334
say,
yards,
let's
three
go.
touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown.
That's not bad. I don't mind that. If you're gonna do it against any team, I love the team you chose to do it against. Um, Drafting wise, I believe Gino goes higher.
No,
No,
lower.
he's
He's
lower than
QB
Stat.
23.
Interesting. So yeah, this is interesting to me because I do have shares of Geno in my best balls. I know that. So I think if I'm talking about a QB that maybe I target if I'm going best ball, super heavy running back receiver, and just taking late shots with QBs, I like him. He's consistent. And like you said, I guess he can hit QB1 at some point in time. I did not remember that week personally in regards to his fantasy ranking, but I feel like I should have. What are
I
what are your
think that
thoughts
the
here?
one thing that we're not playing enough into this is the change in OC and head coach
Yeah.
because The old regime wanted to run the ball down the gut every single
Mm-hmm.
play. Ryan Grubb's not going to want to do that. They're going to want to air it out.
Yeah,
DK Metcalf, I think, is in for a huge year. I think he's being
I do love DK.
undervalued. I
Yep.
do. Especially this year. I've never liked him in the past because of the run first offense, but
Yeah.
now I think he's unleashed a little bit, and I think Geno Smith and DK Metcalf will both
DK
benefit from that.
Metcalf is being drafted roughly around like that 2021 spot too, at a receiver who, man, if they uptick what they've already been doing, that could be pretty nice for him. I won't lie.
Yeah, I mean, last year, see if I can pull it up. He had 500 pass attempts, 3,600 yards. If that goes
Mm,
up,
yeah,
I mean, that's nice.
that is, and you're gonna see Jackson Smith take a step up, or you'd hope. I think he's someone who we didn't really get
It's
to
gonna be
see
hard for him.
everything that he can bring to the table, but with Lockett and how old he is, I don't see how he doesn't get more opportunities. So even like that's where if you have a third guy that you can, if one of those guys goes down, he still has receiver options. It's not like he's out there. He does miss out on. They lost two of their tight ends, right? Will Disley and um, Parkinson there?
Colby Parkinson.
Colby
But does that
Parkinson.
really matter?
No, not him as much. Neither of them, honestly, that much.
They got Noah Fant.
Um, but so there's not crazy changes to this offense besides what you said, the coaching changes. So, how much will these coaching changes matter? And I think you nailed it with it was a run first coaching scheme before. I hope we see more passing because I'm all in
You gotta
on
love the backup.
Metcalf this year, and I like JSN as someone who's kind of being a little bit ignored after being overhyped last season coming in as a rookie.
And the backup would play well if Geno was to ever go down.
I do love the backup situation. For those that don't know my love for Sam Howell, a buddy of mine put me onto him, and I feel bad for him though. If you go back and watch Washington, him with the Commanders, that O line was
Horrendous.
horrendous. It was so bad. I like, and he's someone who his biggest struggle in college, or one of his biggest struggles, was holding on to the ball too long, taking sacks, fumbling. Then he got a line that you can't protect anyways. So it's a guy that's already struggled at getting it out early. So I think in regards to the backups we're going to talk about today, this is probably the one I like the most, maybe. Uh, mm, yeah, probably. I mean, definitely in the top tier of the backup situations in regards to he could step up and he'll probably throw for the same amount. Like, I don't think there's a big gap in regards to the yards that are going to be thrown if he were to be pushed into the situation. And I think he'd be very relevant for fantasy if Geno went down. And again, Geno's 33 years old. He's not young. Now, he's a 33-year-old that was not really the guy his whole career, right? So a little less
No.
beaten and bruised, but still 33. I'm not 33 yet, and when I get injured, I am down and out for the count. So, I can only imagine, this guy is getting smacked left and right. But honestly, he just feels like a very safe play week in, week out. Maybe he's a little bit too low on my rankings, and I think that's someone that I'll need to be reevaluating between now and the season. And maybe I just need to do a little bit more research into Grubb and what he's going to be doing with the OC changes because I don't know a lot about him.
Just gotta look at Washington's offense last year and see how much Penix
Yeah,
aired it out, and then translate that into the NFL, and I think you see success.
yeah, yeah. I think that's someone that through this, and this is why it's important to have multiple people chatting about things. Guys, if you talk football with people and don't actually get in depth and give differing opinions, you're really just boosting each other's egos and not actually thinking and looking into things. I think I might have to evaluate my Geno Smith levels because I will never say just I'm fine with him. He's just mid to me, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a place for that, but maybe he's someone who's more opportunistic than I'm giving credit, and we're going to be evaluating him a little bit more. Jumping to our number 19 spot, this is an interesting spot here because we're looking at someone who has shown that he can be QB1. He can be a top end QB, but old as crap. I mean, this man is basically dirt. And his Achilles was dirt last year. We got Aaron Rodgers coming in at 19 for us. Uh, do not have a QB ranking for him because apparently you need to play more than 4 snaps in order to get ranked at QB. Like 0 yards does not help your stats. Um, it's really hard to rank Aaron Rodgers. I fully believe in the Jets' offense, in their weapons, and they added pieces to their line, which is crucial. Um, it is just terrifying seeing an old man come back from Achilles on his planting leg, right? Am I correct? He was
That
the
was
one
his planting leg, yeah.
on his planting legs. This is different than Kirk's situation. Um, his upside is really nice. He could go and throw for 4,500 yards, and I'd be like, well, that yeah, nope. With this offense and what they can do with Bryce being able to bring some separation at the run game as well as in the pass game, and Garrett Wilson and what he's gonna be with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, like you could be much higher than 19. Now I don't expect him, even if he has a really good season, to be much higher than say 8, like as kind of that upside. I think without having any of that running opportunity and again, all these rankings are off of a 4 point touchdown scale. I did not say that at the beginning, but that's kind of most traditional. Um, there would be some variance, probably, maybe with a 6. I'd have to think about these ones. I didn't put much thought into that, but um, he's someone who brings a ton of upside, but probably the most risk out of our top, 13 to 24. He might be the most risky here. Saad, what's your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers?
So my thoughts are is that this is the most volatile pick I think we'll talk about in this range because he could be anywhere from I would say quarterback 5 to quarterback 29, 30
Yeah.
because he could be our MVP Aaron Rodgers, throw for 5,000 yards, 48 touchdowns, and he looks like he never lost a step, or he could age into oblivion where he throws like 2,500 yards and 19 touchdowns.
Do we know, and I'm going to try and pull it up right now, but what he finished at in his last year of the Packers? Because when I watched that season, I didn't think like he didn't look the same,
He didn't
but
look
it
good.
looked like a mental like checked out type issue because there are times he has these throws and you're like, that's Aaron Rodgers. Like that's a throw that very few QBs can make.
He
Um,
was QB13.
13. So off what I thought was a very mediocre season, ending at QB 13, that's pretty good. And now this offense, I think, is much improved to what he was playing with at the Packers at the time. Significantly improved. I mean, the amount of rookie receivers he was working with, not really a real one, because Adams was no longer there that final year. That was the first years at the Raiders. Um, Running back,
It's a
he
bunch of
had he had
rookies.
Aaron Jones and rookies, and I believe Aaron Jones missed a chunk of those games that season. So it was just like a
Designee.
weird year, and they had drafted the QB the year prior. That like he knew he was on his way out. He didn't want to be there. There was a lot of stuff going on in that year, and he still produced. So I think the last we saw of him, even while feeling like it wasn't good, was still fantasy good, like still fantasy relevant. And now I don't have the consistency numbers in front of me, but I highly doubt it was super inconsistent. I know he struggled at the beginning of that season and improved throughout the year, but if he's healthy, like Saad said, he could be a good QB1 option that you're drafting all the way at like 19, 18, somewhere in that range out of all the QBs. So you're not drafting him high. His upside is high, but so is his downside. Like he could absolutely bust and not be worth anything for you in fantasy, and that's okay to me at the position you're drafting him. If I was drafting him higher, like his ADP climbs, I won't see many shares of him. But at his ADP now, I probably take a shot or two at him, depending on my team format and those sort of things. But I don't mind him.
So this way, will never be my QB1 in any league.
True.
And
Yes,
I would
I
be
would
okay
not
with him
be
being a
happy.
QB2.
Which is funny because I even said like, hey, Geno, Stafford, Caleb Williams, like everyone but Deshaun Watson. If any of them were my QB1, well, I wouldn't even feel great about Bryce. But at least like Stafford, Geno, Caleb, I'd be like, that's fine. Like I better be stacked as hell at receiver and running back if I have them as my starting QB. But Aaron Rodgers, I'd be much more nervous. But the opportunity, if he really steps up, is huge. And we got Tyrod Taylor as his backup, which is I would love Tyrod. Honestly, I think he still brings a little bit of running. His throwing was not that bad at the Giants when he came in and played for them last year. I I don't hate Tyrod. But he's also an old man. Like, and then after that, it's what they draft like some rookie in a late round. This would be their guy after Tyrod if
Yeah,
for some
some
reason.
irrelevant guy.
Yeah.
I mean, anything's a step up from Zach
Yeah,
Wilson,
some
put it that way.
irrelevant guy. I think his name's like Brock Purdy or something. Or that was like 2 3 years ago. Never mind. Yeah, not Mr. Irrelevant. So I wouldn't mind Tyrod if Aaron Rodgers goes down. I'm not someone who would like. Obviously, we're not saying when we're talking about these backups, it's more so just like pointing out like the team is not going to fall apart, or they are going to fall apart if the QB goes down. We are not in any way saying draft the backup QB for any of these teams. You should not. Please don't. Please
Never in any scenario.
don't. None of these scenarios is that worth it. Uh, Jumping over to our QB18, we got Jayden Daniels. I think we're going to get a little crap for having Jayden Daniels ahead of Caleb, even after talking about, um, rookies and how we don't really want them. Jayden Daniels, though, with the running element, just provides more safety net in my mind for fantasy points. Now, I want to start this with saying I do not expect to have much Jayden Daniels shares at all. I'm
Where he's
not
going.
someone who believes in him. Yeah, where's he? He's being drafted
QB12.
12. Ooh, he has 16 on Fantasy Pros. I want to know what their ADP sources are because
Whatever
oh,
they feel like putting down.
Yahoo and ESPN. Okay, that makes more sense. They have terrible rankings.
Underdog has him sandwiched between Caleb and Purdy.
That's crazy to me. I'm taking Purdy over both those guys, and I don't even like Purdy that much. But I mean, I like him a lot more than these guys. So Jayden Daniels just brings a lot in regards to the running. Do I think he's Lamar Jackson? No, I don't think he's smart enough as a runner. And but I'm really interested to see what he can bring to this team. Uh, I don't think they did enough to the line to make me be excited. But you have seen rushing QBs still succeed with mediocre lines. The biggest thing is just coaching changes. So they got OC Cliff Kingsbury, head coach Dan Quinn. So what are your thoughts on just this whole situation and just Jayden in general?
I mean, we already talked about how rookie quarterbacks never succeed in the NFL in their first year, really. I mean, there's exceptions, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jayden Daniels falls in that category. You watch his college tape, there's ups and downs. When he runs, he looks like he's trying to injure himself.
It's
Doesn't know how to
true.
slide at the right times. He like tries to jump over people, and he's just too small for that. It's just not a good look. I mean, he can learn to do that. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
Yeah,
every one of these rookies can learn to be a efficient quarterback in the NFL, but it's going to be growing pains. I don't want to be a part of those growing pains.
yeah, yeah. I think that's completely fair. I think also, extra risk is whether it's OC and head coach you trust or not. New coaches can be tough for fantasy players and just for the teams in general. It's not often that you get the new changes coming in and everything is instantly better, especially when you factor in a rookie QB. So just be aware of that. Obviously, his running upside gives me a little bit more hope for fantasy relevance, but I'm not touching him where he's being drafted. So I again, and I'm not a Jayden Daniels truther either. Like I could see him lasting in the NFL. I think with the right like wisening up and protecting himself, maybe he lasts. I haven't seen enough from the throwing side to know. Like Lamar Jackson, when I watched him come out of college, I saw what he could do as a thrower as well as a runner. So I had a lot more faith in him succeeding. I think too many people make these straight comparisons. I don't feel like I've really seen enough from Jayden, and I know he was incredible in college. He was great. Kurt Warner had I think it was the Fantasy Footballers had him on a few weeks
Yeah.
back, and he actually chose Jane Daniels as his favorite QB out of this draft, even over Caleb Williams, um, kind of for impact immediately. And obviously, you gotta trust some pros, right? They're not scouts, but they did it. They went through the process. So I don't want to discount him too much because I do see a path where he's successful in the NFL. It's one of those. Are you willing to take that risk of him being that low 20s type QB for fantasy with the upside of being maybe 8 somewhere in that like I don't see anything higher than like a top 8 guy for any of these rookies, and it's just not worth the risk, especially for where he's being drafted. For me personally, his backup's Marcus Mariota. I all out on Marcus. I can't stand the guy, um, and I that offense is going to struggle really bad if he comes in, even more so than it could struggle with a rookie QB in my mind. Now I get he's a veteran, he had some success, but I just don't think he has the juice in the tank, and I don't think he has the mindset to be a good backup. Anyways, I don't believe in Mariota, but obviously maybe that offense with Cliff Kingsbury coming in, which I'd be shocked at the OC changed it around to be this crazy offense that even Mariota can succeed at. You never know. I don't know. I don't have much more to say about Jayden.
I do have one last thing that I want to mention about
Mm-hmm.
him, and that's you can kind of think back to Justin Fields' rookie year, where
Mm.
it
Yep.
looked disgusting in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then he kind of got it together in the end. I could kind of see a similar thing happen here with Jayden
Sure.
Daniels. Maybe he starts off better than Justin Fields, because Justin Fields started off awful,
Yeah. It was not the
but
best.
that was not the best. But they're very similar players and their play style. I think the one thing that Jane Daniels has going for him that Justin Fields did not is the offensive coordinator, because Cliff Kingsbury has worked with a quarterback prototype like Jane Daniels and Kyler Murray.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we move on to our number 17 person who I like I mentioned at the very beginning of the stream, I haven't fully finished everything. One of the things I didn't fully finish was my QBs, so we had to kind of adjust a lot. This is someone I had higher just based off my initial statistic rank outs. I needed to make sure I went in and adjusted him. So this is someone that I could even see kind of getting right up to that turn of QB 1 2. Um, but we have him at 17, kind of as a consensus together. Um,
And my fault.
but I have Baker Mayfield at 17. He played 17 games last season, which something you'll notice is not that many QBs played 17 games. Most of the guys in the top 12 did. But played 17 games, ended at QB 11 last year. So we know he can do it. They didn't really add much to this offense besides bringing in an offensive coordinator who was the OC at Kentucky before, and Liam Cohen. Uh, that doesn't feel great to go from a guy who helped turn around Baker's career to a guy who didn't even succeed in college levels to come in and be the OC. But so I think I'm okay with a little bit of a drop off because of some of those changes. But it is Baker year 2 in this situation of having the offense being his. I could see some good success, and I think he's just someone that's consistent. Like I feel really comfortable with the numbers he puts up on a week in, week out basis, and I'd be fine with him as my starting QB. Never someone that's blowing me away. I don't expect him to have those top 5 type weeks. But I feel really comfortable with picking him. And the thing I love about him is he's drafted so late. I don't know exactly on best ball.
QB 22.
22. So yeah, I'm all about that for where he's being drafted. I have a good amount of share of him in best balls already.
I mean, I like Baker Mayfield, don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
It's just I don't see the same kind of success he had last year translating to this year because of the change in OC. And maybe Liam Cohen does okay, maybe he
Yeah.
doesn't. It's hard to say. Guys coming out of college with no real name for themselves is kind of a rough situation to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, the offensive system has not, or the offensive players have not changed really much. I don't think that they added much to the O line. They
I don't
drafted
remember.
a running back that's not going to really contribute much.
Yeah.
I mean, they said Chris Godwin's going to move to the slot more, which, I mean, good for Godwin because that's where he
Hmm.
belongs.
Yep.
But, I
But
mean,
is Trey
nothing really has
Palmer really going to
changed
do much if he's playing
outside
that?
now.
Yeah. It's not like you're
No,
really
it's the Mike
improving that.
Evans and Godwin show.
Hmm. Yeah.
If anything, I think it helps the players not named Baker Mayfield more than it does help Baker Mayfield
Sure.
as far as nothing really changing in the offense.
Yeah. You know what? It's an interesting one because I don't think you're ever like super pumped about a guy like Baker, but he's going to be a good quality QB. I'm fine with him in drafts and where you're getting him. He just brings a lot of value. I'm going to try and pick up the pace just a little bit so we can get through. I think something too to note. When I often think about QB2s just in general, like we're reaching a point where I'm like, I like all these names. We're there is a place and like team build where these are all your starting QBs and you're fine with this at this point. So just because he's listed technically at 17, that'd be the bottom half of QBs. Like he still has good value and a good fantasy player, right? I think it's important just to remember the depth of kind of what some of these guys are. And in a lot of 12-man leagues, there are people who jump on two QBs before you get one. You're going to have some leagues where your starting QB is that like 12 to 15, 16 range. That happens
Not
more
every
frequently than
quarterback's going to be
you'd
healthy.
realize. And exactly, not every QB is going to be healthy. So there's a lot of like factors to consider. And so QB 17 is still a good spot to be. It's not, and if you look at the actual numbers of differences that we have between him and some of the other guys, I think it's important to pay attention to tier ranking. Because
I would
for
say that Baker starts a tier.
yeah, sure. I would put him in the same tier as the next few people we're going to talk about. And I know my ranking is a little bit different on Baker, but pay attention to tier ranking. Have your own tier set up so that you know in a draft. Because maybe if you have him at the same tier as say the next three people, I'm not going to jump and draft someone in this tier if there's all three of them sitting there when there's a receiver running back. Like if we've reached a level where I'm not jumping to take these guys over other valuable positions if there's someone else I like there. And again, it's very draft dependent, but um, let's jump over to our QB 16 unless you had something else to add on Baker.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, this tier of Baker through the quarterbacks we finished are all quarterbacks I'm okay being my QB1.
Yeah,
These next guys are on a tier of their own compared to the people we talked about previously.
yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that. So our QB 16, we have Trevor Lawrence. He was QB 12 last year through 16 games. Currently being drafted, I think, right around where we have him, right? Somewhere around that 16,
QB15.
15, 16. So I think his ADP is at a reasonable spot. I think there's a lot of. This is actually a time where if you're in dynasty leagues, I think this is a buy for me
100%.
personally because there's a lot of people that are fully doubting him, and I don't doubt him. I think he is a good QB. He's a good starter. He has a good offense. He's got a good coach. There's a lot around that you should like about him. They utilize the run game a lot, and they pass too. So I think Trevor is someone who is gonna throw for a lot of yards, have a lot of pass attempts. I just, like in regards to how high he could spike he feels like he's a very safe 8 to 16 sort of range for me, like maybe a couple spots behind, but I don't really see him giving me as much upside as some of these next guys we'll talk about. But I like Trevor Lawrence. I'd be happy with him at my QB1. Obviously, I'm going to want some of my, top 12 guys instead, but if I'm taking a QB a little bit later in the draft, I really like him for where he is. I like the coaching situation. I like the receiving core more than some. And then backup QB Mac Jones. That is an interesting Fine switch. When I was debating if I like Sam Howell the most, Mac Jones was the other person. I was like, well, in this situation, I mean, you see some decent success from some backup QBs with their head coach here. So, if something did happen to T-Law, I don't think it's the end of the world with Mac Jones there.
Yeah, I'm a complete agreement. Also, you see the video of Mac Jones that came out today from
No, I
training
did
camp?
not. Was
He
it
looks
good?
like a completely different person. He's running a drill and then he's like dancing at the end of it.
Dude,
He seems like he's happy.
it's hard to see guys be happy though under a Bill. So I think it's really interesting to see people leave the Patriots and what they end up being like. I'm not shocked by that, and I'm someone too. And we talked about it a lot in the last couple of years. Like Mac Jones has shown so many signs of actually being a fine QB. Obviously, he's also
He gave up
shown
on
a
him too
lot of
early.
signs on just like, oh, that is painful to watch. Like you get a little bit of both with him, but he was also in a really bad situation last year. So in regards to as a backup setting, this is great. I think they got a great backup option compared to all the other backups we're talking about, and it's a good team. And it's a head coach that is going to utilize the players he has and how they operate. So you don't necessarily need to be a mirror image of the starter if you want to succeed when they go down, if they go down for injury. Um, let's jump over to our QB 15, guys. We got 3 QBs left. QB 15. He finished as QB 24 last year. So look at this massive jump we're making. He only played 8 games and still finished QB 24. To me, that stat is nuts. Like, that's wild. 8 games and finished 24. Because you look at some of these guys that are finishing behind him and they played full seasons. We got Mr. Kirk Cousins coming in at number 15. New place in Atlanta. Um, Very interesting backup situation with Michael Penix Jr. being drafted very, very early on. You got new coaches. Raheem Morris, Zach Robinson coming in as head coach and OC. Um, but I think Atlanta for me is one of those places that has had so many weapons without having a QB for the last few years. It's just such a wild card. This whole team feels like a wild card to me, with the exception of Bijan. Like Bijan is so good, he's going to succeed no matter who's there in my mind, barring injury. And I think that's pretty fair to say against across most people's analysis of him. But this
Yeah.
situation with Kirk coming off the Achilles, but it's off on his not his plant foot, into a what seems to be like a good receiving option, a great line, great running back room. What are your thoughts here on Kirk?
Love Kirk Cousins. He's probably one of those quarterbacks where if I don't get the top guy, I'm just gonna punt and get Cousins because I think that he's in a great scenario. Like you said, I think he's got a great O line, which is not something you could say for all of Cousins' career.
Yeah.
And he's got an actual wide receiver one, at least in my mind. He's got
Mm-hmm.
a tight end that'll act like a wide receiver too.
Yeah.
A phenomenal generational running back. I think that everything is set up for success here for Kirk Cousins. If he hits
Yeah.
his ceiling, I think he could easily sneak into the QB ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a little bit of speculation about the Achilles, so we can't put him there quite yet.
Do you have any concern with the fact that they took a QB in the top 10 picks for like
I don't
what this
think so.
situation? Because they paid Cousins. It's not like he didn't
They
get
did.
paid that much. Like he
He's
got
getting
his
paid
money
a lot of money.
for an old
I
man.
think
That's a
that
lot of money.
Atlanta's doing is kind of smart and kind of dumb at the same time. I'll explain myself. It's smart because Penix is not a start now quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to develop.
I agree.
And if he does develop, he's got the skill set and the talent to be an actual NFL quarterback. But it's dumb because they're in a win now situation with
Mm-hmm.
Cousins. And if they gave him like a better tackle, better wide receiver
Yeah.
too, it just amplifies that team, a better rush end. It just would make them so much of a better team right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of tells me that I don't think that they can win a Super Bowl.
Which is
But
crazy to me because I feel like they're not far off. You look at what they did last year without a QB. They had their moments of actually looking pretty decent. I mean, they have a decent defense. It was just the
Yeah.
most bizarre move to me, and I am all for getting QBs to develop and not just be thrown to the wolves like they are now, but to take Penix, who's 24, who needs to develop, like gonna turn 25 next season, and you're
Also
sitting with
forgot.
Kirk, who has years and years on his contract. If he's healthy and plays through them all, like it's just a weird situation. I'm not going to dig into exact. That's a long talk that no one has the right answers for. But what
Real
are you going to
quick, I
say?
forgot
Yeah,
to mention there's that tampering too. They could lose their first round pick next year. So
yeah,
maybe that's their thought process as well. Who
maybe just
knows?
like taking that safety net because it probably was. It's too early when they're making the draft to really know exactly what Kirk is going to be from that Achilles. Um, but with it not being the planting foot and all of that, it's much less concerning. I'm not as concerned about Kirk coming back,
He's not gonna
not
run for a
healthy.
thousand yards anyway.
Yeah. So it's an interesting situation, like, because there is risk involved, but as long as he's playing, he's gonna be a top 15 QB. So I think in regards to where you're getting him at, it's a great pick. It's a good option. I don't have as many shares of Kirk, um, but I don't think it's not because of talent or how I think he's gonna finish. I just have taken a couple other guys I like in my drafting strategy so far. But I'd be very happy with him as my QB1. Jumping over to our 14th person, he played all 17 games last year and ended as QB7. This is someone that I personally will be going through and checking my stats on him and see where my ranking is off because he's much lower on my board than where I'd like him to be. I'd be very happy with Mr. Jared Goff. Um, Basically the exact same situation they were in last year in regards to players, coaches, all those things. Saad, thoughts on Jared Goff?
Yeah, I mean, he was a stud last year. He'll be a stud this year. Like Matt
He
said, I mean,
got
nothing's
paid.
really changing here. He did get paid. He's their guy. They love Jared Goff, and I don't blame them. I mean, he played really well. They were only, I think, a field goal away from going to the Super Bowl last year. I mean, you can't be mad at that.
Yep.
And they're a team set up for success. I mean, the only reason he's down here is just because there's guys up the board who have more upside, in my opinion. That's
Yeah.
all that it is. I'm happy having Jared Goff as my QB1. I mean, would have been last year. It probably will be this year.
Yeah. Yep. I love it. And he's going late too for where he finished last year. I don't know off of you have the good one for ranking.
Underdog, he's QB 16. That's a smash
16.
hit right there.
That's great. I love that. I guess the ESPN and Yahoo have him higher. They have him at going off the board at 12, which I think is a very respectable spot. Like that's fine. I
This is
think.
all ADP for underdog, so this is where,
Yep.
well, not really experts, because anyone can play underdog, but where the average best ball player is drafting them,
The
which I
average
think is
basketball
under
player right now drafting, I trust a lot more than a very generic ESPN Yahoo early rankings,
100%.
right? So I think more of the people that are obsessed with football are on Underdog and doing their like drafting. And I know it's slightly different, but I think about my rankings. I don't flip my players that much based off a best ball format versus a redraft. Like there are some players specifically that I will value a little bit higher, but not enough to actually affect ranking in that drastically. So
That's more like wide
yeah,
receivers.
you're gonna have good opportunities to have Jared Goff without spending capital on a QB. So that's a really nice thing, and his upside is right there. That QB7, maybe even higher. Like I would rather have the other guys we have as QB1s in regards to the upside of being kind of the number one overall. Like I don't see any scenario where he's QB1, two, or three, but I see scenarios where he's consistently a QB1 week in and week out. So
We'll probably end up below
um,
QB1.
so yeah, I love Jared Goff. Great option, and I'm someone who loves this next guy too. And to me, they're very interchangeable. Ended at QB10 last year, played all 17 games, which I think that's a good thing to note too, because a lot of people are nervous with this person because of injuries. He did play all 17 games. Looked much better in regards to how he fell and took hits and those things. We have Tua Tagovailoa, coming in at the 13th spot. Uh, I'm a big fan. I think the Dolphins will still continue to have a great offense. I don't see it being regressing much. It's something that I think I like to look at too is some of the teams in their division and what their defenses did. And you look at the Bills who lost everything defensively, like they lost so much. I That's 2 games a year that they have a slightly easier defense to go against. That's very minor. That shouldn't affect your too much. But in regards to where he's going, he finished QB10. He felt like that type of a player where week in, week out, he was fine. He was good. QB1 type numbers, and you're happy with him. You're not drafting him too early either. ESPN has him at 14. I'm sure it's relatively similar on Sleeper, maybe slightly higher. Um,
Let me go back to it.
but
He is QB14, yeah.
yeah, so right around there, I like that for him. I think he's just kind of that people shy away because of some of the past injuries. But you look at his receiving core and running back room. I mean, that offense is going to score. They're going to get points on the board. I love high-powered offenses and taking weapons from them. And why not take the QB that I feel like I've seen improvement from him each year that he's been in the league. So I feel very comfortable with him as my QB1.
Yeah, I love Tua, man. I mean, the one thing that you can take from last year is that Waddle wasn't healthy most of the year.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of the you can. I mean, when you look at the games, you'll say, "Oh, but he played 16 games last year."
Yeah.
But a lot of those games, actually, it was less than that. It was like 14. But a lot of the games he played, you look at the snap count: 45% of the snaps, 43% of the snaps,
Yep.
60% of the snaps. He just wasn't healthy at all last year for its entirety. He played through injury. I mean, you get a healthy Waddle, a healthy Hill. You have A-Chan, excuse me, and you have
Mm-hmm.
Mostert. Like that's a offense set up to success, and all Tua has to do is just not mess up.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, and I think one other thing that has been dropping him is kind of his end of season numbers versus the first half of the season was better than the second half. So there are some concerns maybe of just like wear and tear, but I think it also aligns pretty well with Waddle's health on the field. So I think you nailed it there. I love him. I think he's a great, safe, easy play. I have plenty of shares of him in best ball too. Again, it's not like a flashy pick, but I value him much more than where he typically goes by at ADP. And he's someone I could easily see dropping a little bit in ADP as some of these other guys get some of their offseason hype. Um, because I think
Easily.
as soon as we
Yeah.
start getting closer to season, Kirk's going to start going up if he's practicing and looking
Rodgers too.
fine.
Yep.
Rodgers, like there's a lot of changes that will happen in this offseason. I did want to get over to our quick question of the day. We have a question. That's it for our QB. Sorry to kind of end that abruptly, but we will be touching on QB 1 through 12 on Wednesday. Let's jump over to the question. We have how do zero RB strategies work, and are they effective? I'm gonna throw this over to Saad because he also has a great example from last year of doing a zero RB strategy, and I can chime in with anything else that you need to help answer this. But I think that's a good question and a strategy that typically is getting more and more popular as the years go on. I think.
Definitely it is. Especially in the age that we're in, where there's a lot of stud wide receivers in the league right now,
Mm-hmm.
and stud running backs. They're kind of aging out, and they haven't really been replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like zero RB is even hero RB is getting more popular.
Yeah.
That's another topic. So essentially zero RB, the whole point of it is your first five, maybe six picks, you don't take any running backs. You take wide receivers, you take your onesie positions, your tight end, your quarterback. So you're studded up on everywhere except for running back. And then you take those guys that, they're starting running backs in the league, but they're not, the studs that everyone thinks about.
Like a
And,
Mostert.
maybe yeah, like like last year's Mostert, and maybe they blow up and they have a career year. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, last year I was at the 101. I took Justin Jefferson,
Yep.
which worked and didn't work because of injury. You can't predict those.
Yep.
And then on the turn, I took Mark Andrews, who I was a huge fan of. Again, worked for most of the year. Can't
Yep.
predict injuries.
Well and good.
And then,
Great.
yeah, I mean, I traded him right way before injury, but that's, besides the point. And then you have Calvin Ridley right next to him, which I was a huge fan of Calvin Ridley. I was a believer.
And he actually
He had his spike
ended
weeks.
Yeah, a little iffy stats because he ended higher than I think people realize. But
Yeah, what did he actually end at?
I'll pull up his number while you keep going on this. I didn't mean to
Yeah,
keep
and
interrupting
then
you.
after those, so I got my two wide receivers, wide receiver one, wide receiver two, got my tight end one, and then on the next turn, I took Justin Fields, who I was hugely big on last year, and then DJ Moore for that stack. Which that's another topic in itself, but
Mm-hmm.
I would just stack quarterback and wide receiver. When they hit, you blow up in points. And
Yep.
then after those picks, so I'm through with my first five picks of the draft. So now it's when I start hammering my running back. So I took David Montgomery. I did take Cam Akers, which did not hit, but you don't hit on all of your picks.
Nope.
That's you don't win at the draft. And
Correct.
then I grabbed Raheem Mostert, which I paired with Achan after the fact to lock up that running back room. And, we all saw what happened last year. Monty was the starting running back for the Lions last year. He was getting his, even after his injury and kind of Gibbs took over, he still got his. And Mostert was just electric, and so was Achan.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up winning that league.
I don't have where he ended, like number wise, but I
Looks
did
like
just pull him up. He had more points on the year than DK Metcalf did, though. So if that gives
looks
you
like
any
wide
range,
receiver 17.
like, yeah, he was up there. He was right in between Chris Olave and DK Metcalf points, total points, which I know,
That's good
there were
company to
some
be
weeks
around.
we had some zeros. Garrett Wilson, he was above him, which I know he had a terrible situation. But, like, he ended up being pretty good, and now he just got paid.
Yeah.
So that's anyways, that it's a great strategy. The zero RB is something that I think you see a lot of older fantasy players not trying as often because for the longest time running backs were so predominant, like first round was so heavy running back, and now you're seeing drafts. If you're doing best balls right now, it's uncommon to see more than like three running backs in the top 12 go. And then the next round, you see, a couple more trickle in, but mostly receivers. Um, it can really work out for you. Now, I think the biggest thing, just to reiterate, I know we mentioned this on the very first episode, like take values. Like don't solely say I'm hard stuck no matter what going zero RB, because if it is something where you really like, maybe you should just be taking some of the values of these running backs or other positions later on. Play it by ear. Don't go in hard set that this is the only way you're going to draft because you don't want to miss on people. But strategies like that, typically you're able to find the value at those other positions of QB and tight end as well. So that's why I think in redraft purposes, um, it is a very viable strategy that's almost always um, able to be done, if that makes sense. Like you're almost always able to do it just because you can find values at other positions besides running back as well instead of just drafting receivers. It does not mean you need five receivers in a row. And you shouldn't do five receivers in a row more often than not because you want some of those other positions. You don't want three bad positions. Um, it's just the running back. And I can't remember if you said this or not, but like after you go with that break, it's okay to take a whole bunch of running backs back to back to back to back and just take your shots on them. You stack up on your running backs at that point. But that's our quick question. I already mentioned that on Wednesday's stream we'll be doing our QB1, so 1 through 12. So definitely don't want to miss that. We'll see who is with me, joining me for that. Otherwise, I'll probably just pick some people's brains so that I can have some other comments if it is just me by myself. Um, I was talking with a few people about possibly doing some night streams and some other time frames just to allow them to be able to join on because it can be difficult with work. Again, all of these are posted on YouTube, and I know most people are watching this on YouTube rather than necessarily here live during the day. But we might have a couple different streams at some different times because I want to make sure that more people are getting on and giving their inputs as well. Again, if you're not following me on X, it's No Chill Boom, and same with on YouTube. And on Friday, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, we are giving away one of the ranking sheets to one of the subscribers live on the stream. We'll do a live thing on the stream so you can see who wins it. and someone will have my rankings, which hopefully I have fully finished by then. If not, it's just going to be continually updated as we go on throughout the off season. But Saad, thank you for being on here. I appreciate it. I always love your input and your thoughts, and it's also just way nicer to have someone to tag team on these. So thank you.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah. All right, guys. We will see you on Wednesday. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch you later. Peace out.